Hey friends, welcome back to my channel. So today I am going to be doing a spring recommendations video. I have a huge range of books. I am going to share 10 books and they're going to range everywhere from a middle grade to adult romance and a bunch of stuff in between. I really like to do seasonal TBRs. I like TBRs in general, but I thought I would share some recommendations if you wanted to create a seasonal TBR. These are some books that I think would be great for spring. I don't do a ton of recommendation videos, not because I don't like recommending books, but because I feel like there are so many books I haven't read that I always have a hard time recommending them because like, what if there's a better book out there that I haven't read? Which I know is silly, but it's what pops into my head whenever I think about doing recommendation videos. So I'm trying to stop that. We're gonna do some spring recommendations. I don't necessarily have great reasons for why I think these are good for spring, but I'll try to share my reasoning, my thought process behind these. So let's get right into the recommendations. So we're gonna start with the one middle grade book, and that is Dark Waters by Catherine Arden. This is technically the third book in a series, so I hesitated to put this on the list. However, this entire series is dedicated around the seasons. So the first book is set in fall, the second one is set in winter, and this third book is set in spring. So I felt like I had to put it on this list. Plus, I'm just obsessed with the Small Spaces series. This middle grade series follows these three friends, and in the first book, they end up meeting this scarecrow, and the scarecrow kind of takes everyone captive and makes them into scarecrows. And these three friends need to battle him and save their classmates. In the subsequent books, he kind of keeps returning. In this one, they are trapped on this creepy island. It doesn't seem like there's any way off, and there is a sea creature and they have to survive on the island. This is a really fun series. It's creepy, it's dark, it's atmospheric. They're really short, they're quick reads. The audiobooks are great. I've read these physically as well as listened to them on audiobook. If you haven't picked up the series, I recommend all of them. Book 2 is my personal favorite, but the fourth one, the conclusion, comes out this summer. So I highly recommend picking this up for spring so that you can finish out the series this summer. Moving into YA, I have two YA fantasies. The first one is The Nature of Witches by Rachel Griffin. This is YA fantasy and it's kind of set in the real world. However, we are following this school of witches and everyone is training to control their powers. In this world, witches control the elements and our main heroine can control all of the elements, and that is extremely rare. In this world, this kind of tackles climate change. So climate is getting out of control and the witches are having a harder and harder time controlling the weather. In this book, we're following her training as well as her trying to contain all of the crazy climate things that are happening. This does take place over a lot of seasons, so you could argue that this could go for any seasons because I think we cover all of them, but I just feel like nature books in general always make me think of springtime, so that is why I'm recommending this one. It's magical, there's a little romance in here. I loved the writing. This is one of the most beautiful books I've ever purchased. Not only is this cover beautiful, but the naked hardcover, stunning. Plus, like, what about this doesn't scream spring, right? The next YA fantasy is Blanca y Roja by A.M. Miclemore. A.M. Miclemore writes these really magical, whimsical, beautifully written fantasy stories, and that is exactly what this is. In this, we are following these two sisters. One of them is doomed essentially to become a swan. There is kind of a light sister, she's blonde and airy, and the other one is the darker sister. She has dark hair, she is more like internal, she's an introvert, and everyone thinks that she is going to become the swan because she seems like the cursed choice. The two sisters are very close and they try to come up with a way so that neither of them is turned into swans. There are also two love interests that we are kind of following their stories as well. This does have a lot of dark themes in it. It's been a minute since I've read this, so I would check on Goodreads for content warnings, but I really loved all of the characters in here. Like I said, this is very magical. There is like a foresty element, there's animals, kind of like a rebirthing element, and just really makes me think of spring for whatever reason. I don't know if it has to do, like I said, with the magic, the forest, the swans, what it is, but if you love fantasy, I really, really recommend this. This is my favorite book by this author, and I just feel like it's really underrated. Moving into adult fantasy, this can kind of cross over between adult and YA, which is why I put it next, but that is the 10,000 Doors of January by Alex E. Harrow. So this was my favorite book of 2019, and I just love this magical story. It is once again set in the real world, but with a fantastical element. There are these doors that will appear and take you into fantastical worlds. Our heroine has grown up alone in this like mansion with her father's employer, essentially. And her father is always out on these adventures collecting different magical items and things like that. One day she discovers this letter, and it kind of takes her down this magical journey. I adored the writing in here. This was such beautiful prose. Just absolutely adored the slightly magical elements. We do eventually go into one of these worlds, and just, like I said, everything about these like slightly magical stories always makes me think of spring. Plus again, this cover, so springy with all the flowers and the colors. This is a pretty hit or miss story. You're either gonna get on with the writing or you're not gonna like it at all. But if you really like kind of more purple prose sort of stories, highly recommend checking this one out. After that, I have Under the Whispering Door by TJ Klune. And in case you're sensing a theme here, this is set in the real world and it's slightly magical. So in this, we are following our main character who dies right at the beginning of the book. His spirit is collected by this person, and she takes him to this magical tea house. There he is going to eventually cross over into the afterlife. But while he is there, he meets the owner of this tea house, who kind of helps spirits come to terms with their death before they move on. There is a ghost dog, and there is another ghost that is living in this tea house. This has so many good themes of found family and identity and what it means to be a good person and to live a fulfilling life. There is a really cute kind of romance that is blossoming throughout here. I loved this book so much. This is a very heart-wrenching story, so definitely make sure you're in a good headspace for this one, because it does tackle death and things like that, and grief and all kinds of heavy topics. I did cry like 3 times while reading this book. Whimsical, magical story. For some reason, it makes me think of spring. So the last fantasy story is Green-Eyed Monster by Elsie Winters, and this is a monster romance. And in this, we are following an orc and a forest fairy. There is gardening happening in this book. So what's more spring than that? This is a really short, cute novella. It's a very soft, sweet romance. I was really hesitant going into this one because it has this like creepy orc on the cover, but he is such a cinnamon roll, and he gives the fairy space to plant her garden, and I loved this. This was so cute. This is such a fun, like, quick romance if you're just looking for like a pick-me-up. Highly recommend this one. Getting into the adult contemporaries, I'm gonna start with one that doesn't look like it makes sense, but that is 8 Perfect Hours by Leah Lewis. And I know that this makes it look like it is a winter Christmassy romance, but this takes place, it opens up in March, and it takes you all the way through like October. So when this opens up, there is a freak snowstorm that is happening in the middle of March. I live in the north, and in March, this stuff happens. So this is my spring right here. This is what I think of for spring. But this is just a really, really cute contemporary story. I do classify this as a contemporary, not a romance, even though there is a romance that occurs in the story. But this is far more about our 2 main characters' personal growth stories, particularly the heroine, who is kind of trying to take control of her life. She feels really obligated to care for everyone around her, her mother, and that are going through a lot, and she's kind of always put her life and priorities on the back burner. And this is really about her figuring out what she wants out of her life. All of that is kind of stemming from meeting this guy, and they have this really cute meet cute during the snowstorm, and they keep running into each other despite the odds of them never seeing each other again. They form this relationship and kind of help each other figure out what direction to take their lives in. I love Leah Lewis's writing in general. I loved Dear Emmy Blue by this author. I loved this book, and I really recommend this for the springtime, just since it does start in March. I understand why a lot of people would think this is a Christmas romance, even though it's very much not. After that, I am recommending Hang the Moon by Alexandra Bellafleur. Again, like, look at this cover. It's so springy. I guess you could argue it's summer. But the first book takes place and it ends like over winter and it ends in New Year's. And this takes place right after that. So I think this does have a spring setting in it. I would say you have to read Written in the Stars, the first book, before this one. But I think if you really wanted to skip it, you could still get on with this book just fine. These main characters are just kind of connected to our heroines from book one. So it might take a little bit more to get connected to these characters just because of that, but it does have its own like standalone romance in here. So in this, we are following the brother and best friend of one of the heroines from book one, and this is a childhood friends to lovers romance, and it is so sweet and so cute, and this kind of revolves around rom-coms. So our heroine doesn't really believe in love and our hero is all about love. He started a dating app and so he is trying to convince her of true love by performing all of these like big romantic gestures and dates from famous rom-coms, and it's just a really cute story. I love this author's writing. This is a really feel-good romance for the spring. The second to last book I'm recommending is Delilah Green Doesn't Care by Ashley Herring Blake, and I don't have a great reason for why I'm recommending this one for spring, other than the fact that it's really cute and it came out recently and I want to recommend it to everybody. This is a female-female romance and we are following Delilah, who is kind of the outcast in her family. Both of her parents died when she was really young and she was kind of taken in by her stepmother. She never felt like she belonged there. She didn't connect with her stepmother. She has a stepsister that they kind of always butted heads growing up. Once she turned 18, she moved to New York, became a photographer, and never really looked back. But now her stepsister is getting married. She's kind of convinced to come back and photograph the wedding. She ends up having a romance with one of the bridesmaids. Claire is a single mom and her ex has recently moved back to town and he's kind of super unreliable. She's really struggling with letting her daughter build this connection with him because she doesn't trust him to stick around. They have a romance that is so cute. It's kind of like an opposites attract. I don't want to say enemies to lovers because neither of them really disliked each other. They just weren't in the same circles. This not only has a great romance, but it has great explorations of family. There is a really interesting miscommunication plot in here because when our heroine returns back to her small town, she realizes that her interpretation of her childhood is in fact an interpretation and everything she remembers might not be exactly as it happened. And so there's a really cool exploration of family and things like that in here. Loved this book. Gave this one 5 stars. Ashley Herring Blake is such a fantastic author for creating like characters that aren't necessarily super likable, but you still end up loving them anyways, and just creating these really complex dynamics between characters. And I absolutely loved it in this. I really hope that she continues to write adult stories. There are going to be some more books following these characters and I cannot wait. And then the final book I'm recommending is, again, I don't have a solid reason for it other than it just came out and I want to recommend it all the time, and that is Hook, Line, and Sinker by Tessa Bailey. This is the follow-up to It Happened One Summer. And in this, we are following Hannah, who is the sister, and Fox, who is the best friend to the hero from book one. This whole series and this book takes place in this small seaside town in the Pacific Northwest. It's kind of rainy and I don't know, really cozy. And this romance was so good. Hannah is working for this like film crew. She's really trying to take the next step in her career and take control of her life and figure out like where she wants to go and what her dreams are. When she comes to a small town, she needs a place to stay, so she stays with Fox. He kind of helps give her the confidence that she needs. She is proving to him that he is worthy of love. He grew up being overly sexualized by everyone around him, and he has kind of assumed that his only worth in society is his appearance and his ability to attract women. Because of that, he is very demeaned by the people around him. She is kind of pulling him out of that while he helps push her, and they have such a good romance. I love this world, I love these characters, and I cannot recommend this one enough. So that is all 10 of the recommendations I have for spring. Let me know if you have any great books to read for spring. Let me know if you've read any of these ones and what your thoughts were, and I will catch y'all in my next video. Bye!